You know the script by heart. The meeting is scheduled. You've prepared. You've rehearsed your points in the shower, organized your thoughts during the commute, maybe even written them down in neat bullet points on your notepad. But when your turn comes to speak, something happens. Your throat tightens like someone pulled an invisible drawstring. Your hand reaches for the mouse, the pen, anything solid like a swimmer reaching for the edge of the pool. And then, before you know it, the moment passes. Someone else fills the silence, and you exhale, relieved and defeated at the same time. At parties, you gravitate toward walls. You become furniture. You perfect the art of looking busy with your drink, your phone, anything that creates a buffer between you and the terrifying possibility of being seen. In school, you knew the answer you always knew, but your arm felt like it was made of concrete. Today, you're an adult. You carry projects on your shoulders, maybe a family, certainly a full calendar. And yet, there's still that ancient whisper running beneath everything you do. Don't mess this up. Don't draw attention. Stay small. Maybe they called you a blessing because you were well behaved, quiet. You didn't cause trouble. And that compliment always came with a strange aftertaste, sweet on the outside, hollow on the inside. Approval wrapped in disappearance. You learned early that staying quiet was safer than standing out. And for a long time, that silence saved you. It saved you from harsh words, from cruel laughter, from the sharp edges of embarrassment. But at what cost? When I say quiet child, I'm not handing you a label. I'm offering you a map. And maps require us to understand the terrain before we can navigate it. There's a difference between the healthy introverts, someone who loves silence, needs solitude to recharge, but can speak when needed. There's the slow, too warm temperament, the person who enters a room cold, but given a few minutes of safety, finds their voice. And then there's the silence that hurts, the kind that locks you out of classrooms, boardrooms, relationships, the kind that makes participation feel like walking into traffic. This is a space to understand the story behind that silence, where it came from, what it protected, what it wounded, and what might still change. Before we reach for grand metaphors, let's start with something simple, a volume knob. Picture it. On your first day of learning to protect yourself, that knob saved your life. Turning down the volume of the world meant turning down the criticism, the stares, the impossible expectations. By volume knob, I mean all those habits you developed to keep from hurting. Speaking softly, over-preparing so no one would question you, choosing the edge of the circle instead of its center, letting someone louder take the spotlight while you blended into the background. The low volume preserved you. It was intelligent. It was necessary. But here's the paradox that lives inside protection. When the knob gets stuck at 0, you stop hearing yourself. The same silence that once shielded you is now the silence that imprisons you. And your body knows this. It speaks in its own language signals. Most people dismiss as weakness, but are actually evidence of a finely tuned alarm system. The knot in your throat that seems to trap sound before it can escape. The heat rising to your face, convincing you that everyone in the room is staring, judging, waiting for you to fail. The shallow breathing, as if oxygen suddenly became expensive and you couldn't afford a full breath. This isn't weakness. This is your nervous system in surveillance mode. When childhood taught you that speaking equals danger, your body learned to brake before every curve. It's not betraying you. It's trying to protect you with outdated instructions. And somewhere in an ancient story, there's a man who understood this intimately. A man who, when called to speak, didn't step forward with confidence. He stepped back with a list of reasons why someone else should go instead. His name was Moses, and his story might be more familiar than you think, not because you've heard it in a sermon, but because you've lived it in a conference room, at a family dinner, In every moment you opened your mouth to speak and felt the words dissolve before they could reach the air. But we'll get to him. First, let's understand the architecture of what happens inside you when the world asks you to be seen and everything in you screams to hide. Let's look into a human mirror, not at a flawless hero carved from marble, but at a man who, when called to speak before others, did exactly what you've done 1,000 times. He stepped back. Moses. You might know his name from childhood, from movies, from somewhere in the back of your memory. But forget the dramatic scenes for a moment. Forget the staff and the sea. What matters here isn't religion, it's humanity. It's the raw, unpolished moment when a man is asked to use his voice and responds not with courage, but with an inventory of his own limitations. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. In today's language, I freeze. I stumble over words. Pick someone else, anyone else. Picture him standing there, shoulders curved inward, already rehearsing his escape. This wasn't false modesty. This was a man who had spent decades in silence, hiding in the desert, tending sheep far from the courts where he once walked, far from the language he once spoke fluently. The years had rusted something inside him, and when the call came, his throat remembered every reason to stay quiet. Here's what strikes me. He wasn't punished for his hesitation. He wasn't labeled a coward or dismissed as unworthy. Instead, he received something profoundly practical: a companion, Aaron. Someone to walk beside him, to translate when the words tangled, to share the weight of speaking when his own voice faltered. This wasn't a miracle that erased fear overnight. It was structure. It was support. It was the ancient equivalent of someone saying, "You don't have to do this alone." And then the story unfolds, not in one triumphant moment, but in a series of small, trembling steps. Moses speaks before authority and survives. He speaks before his own people and survives. He navigates conflicts, confrontations, moments where everything inside him must have screamed to disappear. Each time, the task appeared, the body trembled, the support held, and he moved forward anyway. This is what psychologists today might call gradual exposure. The fear doesn't vanish like smoke in wind. It's walked through, again and again, with boundaries, with someone beside you, with the slow accumulation of evidence that speaking doesn't always end in catastrophe. Looking at Moses this way isn't about preaching. It's about recognition. It's about understanding that even those who carry enormous responsibilities, who lead, who guide, who eventually find their voice, so carry histories of silence, histories of excuses, histories of "I can't, I'm not enough, choose someone else." And still, there was a path forward. Maybe you've never parted any seas, but you've stood at the edge of your own impossible crossings, conversations you couldn't start, opinions you couldn't voice, needs you couldn't name. And maybe, like Moses, what you needed wasn't a miracle. What you needed was structure, support, someone to walk beside you while your voice remembered how to work. The question isn't whether the fear will disappear. It won't. The question is whether you'll find your Aaron and whether you'll take the first trembling step anyway. So where does this pattern come from? How does a child learn to turn down their own volume until they can barely hear themselves? The anatomy is simpler than you might think. What repeats becomes belief. Belief sustains strategy. Strategy extracts cost. Think of a sensitive child in a loud household, voices competing, interruptions constant, no space for the quiet thought to finish forming. Think of a classroom where a teacher calls on you without warning, and the laughter that follows your stumble burns itself into memory. Think of a family dinner where expressing a feeling earns you a label: dramatic, too sensitive, making a big deal out of nothing. Think of the small cruelties children inflict on each other, the snickers when you mispronounce a word, the eye rolls when you take too long to answer. These moments don't announce themselves as formative. They slip in quietly, like water through cracks, and settle into the foundation of who you believe yourself to be. And from these experiences, beliefs are born. If I stand out, I'll be humiliated. It's better to be invisible than to become a joke. Not causing trouble is safer than asking for what I need. These aren't thoughts you chose. They're conclusions your younger self reached in the dark, trying to make sense of a world that felt unpredictable and harsh. From beliefs come strategies, the quiet architecture of self-protection, speaking softly, rehearsing sentences in your head and abandoning them at the last second, choosing the seat at the edge of the room, attaching yourself to someone louder, letting their voice cover your silence, studying until exhaustion so no one will ever call on you unprepared, becoming an expert at reading the mood of others, adjusting yourself accordingly, and, when possible, staying mute. Moses knew this architecture intimately. Before the desert, before the burning bush, there was a man who had learned that speaking could cost him everything. He had seen violence. He had fled. He had spent 40 years in silence, tending sheep in a landscape that asked nothing of his voice. The strategies that kept him safe also kept him hidden. But strategies always charge a price. And here's where it gets painful. The cost of chronic silence is a loneliness that wears the mask of peace. It's opportunities that pass you by while you watch from the sidelines. It's the persistent ache of not belonging even when you're physically present. It's relationships where you participate without ever truly appearing. Developmental psychology has shown us something important. When care is consistent, the body learns an internal map of trust. When care fails, when it's unpredictable, critical, or absentee, body learns vigilance instead. Research links emotional neglect and constant criticism to higher risks of anxiety and depression. This isn't meant to frighten you. It's meant to validate you. You're not inventing this. There's a reason your nervous system sounds the alarm. Some people carry this further than others. Adults who systematically avoid any form of exposure. Children who speak freely at home but go nearly silent at school. Psychology has names for these patterns: social anxiety, selective mutism. These aren't stamps of damage. They're ways of naming what hurts so that care can become more precise. Your silence has a history, and that history deserves to be understood. Here's the paradox that holds you captive, and it's simpler than you might expect. A virtue without boundaries becomes a prison. Your reserve is beautiful. You observe before you act. You respect others' space. You think carefully before you speak, when you speak at all. These are genuine qualities, not flaws dressed up as strengths. But when the boundary disappears, when the volume knob rusts at 0, you vanish inside your own virtue. The very silence that once protected you becomes the silence that now confines you. This is the quiet trap. The more you protect yourself by avoiding speech, the more the belief that speaking is dangerous builds muscle. The less you practice, the more your throat forgets the pathway to voice. Like a road overtaken by weeds, the route becomes harder to find the longer you stay away. Moses spent 40 years in the desert, 40 years of silence, of tending sheep, of conversations limited to bleating and wind. When the call came, his voice had grown unfamiliar to him, a stranger living in his own throat. The virtue of his solitude had calcified into a wall. Let's recognize this pattern where it actually lives, not in theory, but in your daily life, in your body. In the meeting, you rehearse the entire sentence in your head. You polish each word, but when your turn arrives, your mouth goes dry and the thought retreats. Never mind, it's not that important. In the Q&A after a lecture, your hand rises internally, but your arm stays glued to your side as if weighted with invisible stones. As a parent, you catch yourself urging your child, say hi, go on, and then, Watch the familiar cringe as they curl into themselves, and you drive home marinating in guilt. Did I protect too much? Did I expose too much? The body keeps speaking, even when you don't. Tightness in the chest, the knot in the throat that seems to grow thorns, palms slicking with sweat, heat flooding your ears, a social exhaustion that feels like fever, like you've run a marathon just by being in a room with other people. These signals aren't proof of weakness. They're reminders that your system is on high alert, and alert is not a life sentence. 3 questions to help you see more clearly, without wounding yourself. Where did you say "I'm fine" while your body screamed otherwise? In which relationship do you call your silence peace? What request have you postponed because asking might make you look fragile? If any of these land somewhere tender, that's not a verdict against you. It's information. It's your inner compass trying to show you where the path has grown over, where the voice has been waiting, patient and quiet, for you to remember it exists. The prison has a door, and the door isn't locked from the outside. Now let's talk about micro steps, small movements, possible today. This isn't about dramatic transformation or becoming someone unrecognizable by next week. It's about training presence with clear boundaries, 1 brick at a time. Micro step 1, name the story. Say it to yourself, out loud if you can. I was or I am a quiet child, and there were reasons for that. Naming doesn't erase the past, but it loosens guilt's grip and opens a small crack where choice can enter. Keep an anchor phrase ready for when the reflex to silence yourself kicks in. My silence has a history. I don't have to live on autopilot inside that history anymore. Micro step 2. Map your triggers. For 1 week, simply observe. Notice where the quiet child mode switches on strongest. Is it speaking in groups? Asking for an extension? Disagreeing with someone in authority? This isn't about judging yourself, it's about gaining a map. Jot it down, brief and in your own words. Anchor phrase. When I understand where I freeze, I begin to have a choice. Micro step 3. 1 gesture of presence at a time. Instead of promising yourself you'll become outgoing, choose minimum viable goals. In a meeting, say 1 sentence. In a conversation, ask 1 question. At a social gathering, stay 5 minutes longer before slipping out. This is the logic of gradual exposure, the same path Moses walked. Your body needs to experience, in small doses, that speaking isn't always catastrophe. Anchor phrases. Today I choose 1 small situation to be slightly more present. I can test whether the disaster my fear predicts will actually happen. Micro step 4. Scripts for the adult who's learning self-care. Practice these quietly, then carry them into life. I want to help, and today I can't. I can deliver this part. The rest, I can't guarantee. I need to think about it. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Thank you for the invitation. I'll pass this time. I care about us, and this way is exhausting me. Can we adjust? These scripts create boundaries without aggression. They're fences, not walls. Micro step 5. For parent support, without humiliating exposure. Avoid both extremes. Always speaking for your child, they lose practice and forcing the stage. Say hi, everyone's waiting, which breeds shame. Agree on signals beforehand. Practice at home. Can I wave instead of saying hi? Explain what the situation will be like. Offer exits. If it gets too much, we'll step outside and breathe, then come back. Anchor phrases. I won't use my quiet child as a trophy for being no trouble. I can protect them without hiding them from the world. Micro step 6. Consider professional help when the cost is high. If your child can't speak in important contexts, for extended periods, or if you systematically avoid everything requiring exposure, specialized support is worth seeking. Therapy isn't a certificate of defecteats. supervised training in new ways of existing. Moses had Aaron. You're allowed to have someone to anchor phrases. Asking for help is also a way of finding my voice. It's not weakness to seek support. Weakness is being forced to face everything alone. Let's return to the scene. A man standing in the wilderness, fire burning in a bush that won't turn to ash, and a voice asking him to do the impossible. His response? I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. Notice what Moses does here. He names his difficulty microstep 1, lived thousands of years before anyone wrote it down. He doesn't pretend it's easy. He doesn't paste on a confident smile. He tells the truth about what lives in his throat. And what does he receive? Aaron? Not a magic cure, not an instant transformation, but a companion, someone to share the speaking, to rehearse alongside him, to provide structure that makes presence sustainable. Microstep 6, embodied in a brother. Here's what matters most. As the story unfolds, Moses doesn't become someone else. He doesn't suddenly transform into a charismatic orator who commands rooms with effortless charm. He remains himself, his own rhythms, his hesitations, his pauses. What changes isn't his personality. What changes is his relationship with fear and presence. The boundaries grow clearer. The practice becomes more frequent. His body slowly learns that it's possible to cross the plaza without being destroyed. The path of the quiet child isn't about becoming a showman. It's about having access to your own voice when you need it, without betraying who you are. Let's weave the anatomy together with daily life. Understanding the mechanism isn't about finding someone to blame, not your parents, not your teachers, not yourself. It's about gaining a map, and with a map, you can rehearse the journey. Remember the volume knob. The goal was never to crank it to maximum and leave it there forever. The goal is to unstick it, to have access to low volume when you need rest, and medium volume when you want to participate. Clear boundaries mean you choose when to stay silent and when to speak, not the fear. To anchors help many people breathe easier when this feels overwhelming. The first is simple. Consistent care creates an internal map of trust. When that care was missing or unpredictable, your body learned vigilance instead. That's why your alarm system fires in situations that seem ordinary to others. It's not malfunction, it's memory. Your nervous system is working with old data. The second anchor. The brain loves evidence. It's not interested in positive affirmations alone. It wants proof. If you repeat small, safe experiences of speaking day after day, situation after situation, your system gradually learns that voice doesn't equal attack. Each time you speak and survive, you're not just getting through a moment. You're rewriting the code. You're teaching your body a new equation. This is physiology in service of your freedom, not theory, not wishful thinking. The actual architecture of your nervous system, capable of learning new pathways at any age. Moses walked this road. You can too. Maybe you recognize yourself in these scenes, leaving a gathering with the hollow feeling that no one really met you, that you were present in body but absent in substance. Like a photograph someone forgot to develop, having brilliant ideas in a group project and watching others present them, your contributions dissolved into their voices, feeling your throat tighten at the mere thought of sound, as if your body still believes that speaking is a synonym for danger. Maybe, as a parent, you've lived the quiet agony of say hi, come on, watching your child curl inward while relatives wait, then driving home swimming in doubt. Did I push too hard? Not hard enough. None of this condemns you. It informs you. Here's a small experiment. 7 days. Nothing dramatic, just enough to start loosening the rust on that volume knob. Days 1 and 2. Simply observe. Notice where your body closes the door on your voice. The meeting where you swallow your thought. The conversation where you nod instead of responding. Don't judge, just map the territory. Days 3 and 4. Choose one minimal situation to be slightly more present. One sentence in a discussion. One question to a colleague. Not a revolutionary, single brick laid on new ground. Day 5. Practice a boundary script and use it with someone safe. I need to think about this. I'll get back to you tomorrow. Feel the words in your mouth before they matter. Day 6. Tell yourself the story, out loud, if you can bear it. My silence had reasons, and today I'm beginning to have a choice. Day 7. Share a small piece of this process with someone you trust. Ask them to walk beside you for a week, your own Aaron, your companion in the crossing. You might be thinking, okay, but what if I fail? Here's the reframe. Failure has another name in this work. It's called training. You don't erase an old road in a single day. You open a new trail and walk it again and again until your body learns that this path also belongs to you. If you stumble, you haven't returned to square one. You've simply discovered that your volume knob still sticks sometimes, and you keep applying oil. 2 validations to carry in your pocket for the days when this feels impossible. First, you have every right to be a calm person. Quietness isn't the problem. What hurts is when calm becomes a synonym for erased. When your stillness stops being a choice and starts being a cage. Second, you were not born to be a silent ornament in other people's lives. Your voice doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be yours. Moses never became a man who loved public speaking, but he became a man who could speak when it mattered, with support, with practice, with trembling hands, and a voice that carried anyway. That's the invitation. Not transformation into someone else, just access to the voice that's been waiting, patient and faithful, inside you all along. We've walked a long road together, and now it's time to gather what we've found. The central truth of everything we've explored is simple, and I'll say it the same way I planted it at the beginning. Many quiet children don't have a defect. They have a sensitive way of functioning that, without understanding and support, can transform into anxiety, isolation, and the silencing of their own voice. But when this pattern is named, understood, and cared for, it can change. The quietness can remain as a quality, a genuine strength, but with clear boundaries that allow you, and the child you once were, to participate, to take a stand, to ask for help without betraying yourself. Moses carried his hesitation all the way to the end. He never woke up one morning suddenly eloquent, suddenly comfortable with crowds and confrontation. But he learned something more valuable than ease. He learned that his voice could carry even when it trembled. He learned that support wasn't weakness, but wisdom. He learned that the same mouth that called itself slow and heavy could speak words that changed history. Not because the fear disappeared, because he walked through it anyway. Hold this image, turning on a light in a silent room. The purpose isn't to start a party. It's to see where the edges are and where the path to the door lies. You've been sitting in that room for a long time, perhaps navigating by memory, bumping into furniture you'd forgotten was there. The light doesn't change the room. It simply lets you see it clearly. You don't have to choose between being quiet and being seen. There's a space where your calm and your voice can coexist, not competing, but complementing. Your stillness can be a gift. Your words, when they come, can be medicine. Both belong to you. From today forward, let every small word spoken with authenticity be a step out of the prison and a step into a fuller presence in your own life, not someone else's version of presence. Yours, with your rhythms, your pauses, your particular way of arriving at truth. In the next 24 hours, choose one small gesture, a single sentence in a meeting, a wave practiced with your child as a way of saying hello, A simple "I need to think about it, I'll get back to you tomorrow." Then, after you do it, notice your breathing. Notice what shifts. This isn't the end of anything. It's a doorway. Moses stood at the edge of a sea with a nation behind him and impossibility ahead. And somehow, step by trembling step, the path appeared. Not before he moved, but as he moved. Your path works the same way. The child who learned to stay small is still in there, waiting to be told it's safe to take up space. You can be the one who tells them. You can be your own Aaron now. One word at a time, one breath at a time, one brave, imperfect step at a time.